this meeting of the Finance Committee of the Bossier Parish School Board. Our primary purpose for meeting today is to get a review of the proposed fiscal year 2019-20 budget. That is shown on your agenda as the first item. With the permission of the committee, I would like to, in fact, take up items 2 and 3, and then that would allow us the balance of our time to address the budget and any questions that might arise. So if I hear no objections, we'll go ahead and direct our attention to item number 2, a request for approval of guidelines for the back-to-school check and 13th check. These guidelines were provided to everyone via email, and I assume everyone's had an opportunity to review them. This time, Mr. Rougeau, would you address the matter of the guidelines?
The back-to-school check guidelines and the 13th check guidelines are what we have used for that the board has directed us to use for the last several years. On the back-to-school check, it would be delivered on the first day of school. It'd be an actual check, and the employees would have to sign for those, stating that they had received that, and if they did not complete their entire contract year, that we would be due a pro rata share back from the employees. So basically, all the other, well, everything, including that, is the same as it has been for the last several years. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rougeau, this is $725 for all full-time employees, regardless of certified support or anybody. So we're giving everybody.
Full-time.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understands that we are giving everybody the same dollar amount.
Yes, sir. The only difference would be the crossing guards. They would receive a quarter of that, and that's going to be in their daily rate of pay.
But bus drivers, principals,
$725
teachers,
across the board.
custodians, everybody's
Across the
getting
board.
welcome back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're quite welcome. Ms. Brotherton.
Almost forgot my name, didn't I? Mr. Rougeau, the 13th check, when do we get that? November?
Yes, ma'am. That is the last Friday before the Thanksgiving holidays.
And I can't remember the amount. I'm sorry.
$600 for the professional staff and $350 for the support staff.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, do I hear a motion to approve this request? Motion by Ms. Smith,
Second.
second by Mr. Newman. All in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed? There being none, matter is approved. I think, please forgive me, I think I put the cart before the horse on item number 3. I wasn't thinking. We need to go ahead, and I think it'd be more appropriate to have a review of the budget before we approved for advertising. So at this time, Mr. Rougeau, the floor is yours. We got to quit meeting like this now. You've been on that hot seat quite a bit for quite a few hours the last couple of months. Go ahead, sir.
All righty. The format for the proposed general fund budget, you can see the description of the line item, and then we have a preliminary column, preliminary totals for the 18-19 budget, just to kind of give you an estimate of where we think we'll end up the year after all the receivables and payables come in for June 30th. In the middle, there is the revised budget that we've been operating under, and then the proposed 19-20 budget, and then the far right column is just a column that would show the percentage of change from the proposed budget versus the revised budget. So it gives you a quick glance to see, any proposed changes that we might have, either plus or minus, to the proposed budget versus the revised budget for 18-19. So I know we've gone through these sections very thorough in the last couple of weeks, and so I'd be happy to answer any questions. Just some of the things that I know that would jump up at you. The interest on the investments, of course, is an increase from the revised budget. You can see that we think that we will, or pretty much know at this point, the preliminary totals for interest was just shy of $500,000 for the general fund. So we budgeted 470. So that is an increase from the revised budget from the 18-19 budget. So that was a significant increase there.
And these examples are what? What are some examples of these investments that are garnering this additional interest?
Certificates of deposit, and of course our fiscal agent agreement has interest built in on all of our accounts that we have are earning interest daily on that. So that's the main things there. We don't have any.
So if the Fed starts cutting interest rates like you're starting to hear some scuttlebutt about, that's not going to be a drastic impact on that number?
It will, if the rates start going down, it will impact that number.
Are you comfortable with this number?
At this point, I am.
Okay.
And let me interrupt you for a moment, Mr. Arujo. If anyone in the audience has any questions, please raise your hand, jump up and down, get our attention because we want everyone to participate. Yes, Ms. Mickey. I'm sure, Mr. Downing, we can address that issue going forward.
Glad to.
Any other comments or questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Ruggiero.
Okay, you can see a decrease of 78% on our sale of fixed assets. Of course, we sold quite a bit of land during the 18-19 years, so we don't expect that same amount. Of course, that could change during the year. It just depends on what we have, so that's a conservative number there. Also on line 14, the Medicaid therapy services, you can see it's a decrease over what we received for this year. This year we had received some arrears or some payments that were due to us that I don't expect to receive that again. They were kind of one-time catching up on some of the requests that we had made and some of the services that have been provided. So that's the reason for that decrease. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about the local sources of revenue.
So,
Ms. Smith?
Mr. Ruggiero, on the Medicaid reimbursement, so, I mean, that's less than half of what we're anticipated. So half of that was in arrears, or?
Yes, ma'am. If we look at some of the years in the past, is kind of what that number is based off of historic. It definitely could increase during the year, but a good bit of the revenue that we received this year was from past years that they were making up for. So I know we received some money that was 2 or 3 years in arrears that they owed us for. So.
And the interest on investments, that's all of surplus, that's everything?
That's all the funds in the general fund. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The reserves, and that's everything. General fund,
Pardon me?
that's the reserves also?
Yeah,
Okay.
off of our fund balance.
Mr. Downing?
Ms. Holly, if you don't mind, could you give some information to the board about what y'all are doing, your social workers, psychologists, as far as Medicaid is concerned and reimbursement for the school system?
We bill, when we see students for counseling or
Are we taking full advantage of every opportunity, or if not, is there something we could do to broaden that net, so to speak?
I think we should be looking at some of our therapists that could bill for Medicaid. They should be moved into the area that they could be billing. And if we have any therapists that are licensed, they should be billing for those services for behavioral health. But if we have any therapists that are not billing right now, then we need to get them to do that.
Okay, thank you. Colonel, if you don't mind, can you give the board an update about what we've tried to do as far as transportation reimbursement from Medicaid?
Yes, sir. For the past 5 years, we've been documenting every day the students that we transport, the special education students. Every day, 36 bus drivers do their logs and who they're transporting. We've taken this information, we've sent it to contractors. The contractors send it to the state send it to the auditors, and for 5 years, it's just been going round and round. And so we have finally got to the point where we received a check.
No money's been received yet. We received a notice from the
Another-
audit of a couple of years ago.
Yeah, for the 16-17 school year, we're going to get $108,000. And so I think next year it may be a couple $100,000. So the good news is at least somebody has acknowledged the fact that Bossier Parish should do some money. And so we did not, Coach, qualify for the 14-15 year or the 15-16, but we've been told from here on out we're going to be getting some funds.
Very good.
So that is something we're going to continue to pursue and
Yes, sir.
try to take full advantage of that.
36 drivers and one of our workers didn't get the data logs and submit it to our contractors, and then it gets over to the facility.
Yeah, we just finished the application for that for June 30th that was submitted, so we'll continue to pursue that. So those numbers are not included in this. This is just for the therapy service. The transportation, Medicaid is not included here.
Okay, so that was kind of the way I was going. So that's just strictly therapy, not any transportation. Now, what we're being reimbursed, is that our cost of operation? Do we know, is there some type of formula? Is it
They
a
do.
per mile rate? So are we recuperating costs that we've already expended, or are we just being compensated for the efforts we put forth to transport these students?
I mean, Mr. Newman, it's a complicated formula.
Okay.
I mean, the state, our contractor bills the state so much. The state takes like 38%. Somebody else takes a percent.
Okay.
And again, what was left over was $180 for us. I can't even begin to take that.
Okay, but that's strictly coming back to us in a transportation department, right?
That's true, once we do receive it. So it may take, I've received these audit reports, and then it may be a year or 2 years before we get any money, so.
I'd like to make sure that money stays within the transportation department, and when it comes in, let's look at some different ways to assist the transportation department and possibly bus operators, bus aides that did the work for this money, and let's see what we might be able to come up with for the transportation department.
Yeah, we'll let the committee know when we actually receive the money.
Okay, thank you.
Before we move on, the comments regarding the therapy items and the possible additional means of generating revenue, are we in agreement that there will be follow-up and it will be quickly done, that we can get these people who are certified, we can get them to billing, and persons who are maybe in the wrong job classification, we move them to the proper one so they can begin billing, as opposed to just thinking about it. We're gonna push to ensure that we're maximizing every billable reimbursement we can.
Mr. Bullard, I can forward those names to Mr. Downey, and Mr. Russo can look at that and work that out.
That could be a significant amount of money.
when they bill Medicaid for therapy, it is a lot of money. And we also, in dovetail with transportation, Medicaid, we met with Mr. Bergeron yesterday, and those therapy services that we do on transportation, we pulled those students' names to make sure that we're covering when they have a transportation ride, that we bill for the services that they receive, like PT, nursing, OT, all of that can be billed as well for the transportation that we receive, so we're covering all of that as well. So we'll get those names to down in this.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? If not, Mr. Ruggio, proceed.
Okay. The next section is the state sources of revenue. You can see that the big dollar increase is on line 19, the MFP. And that includes a couple of different things, that the funds for the $1,000 state raise for professional staff and $500 for support staff is included in that increase, as well as the 1.375 increase in the base per pupil amount for the MFP. So it's included on line 19. The only other changes are not large dollar amounts, just some little minor adjustments. The line 22 is a professional improvement program, and was started back in the early 80s, late 70s, and most of our employees are retiring that were able to participate in that program, so that number will continue to decrease. And on state grants, we're always unclear at this time of year exactly how many grants that we will receive, so we've budgeted conservatively on line 29. But overall, we'd have a 3.46 increase, mainly due to the increase in the MFP. Any questions on the?
Yes, from the
Yes, I
audience.
was wondering, on the increase in the MFP, is that just going to go flush into the salary schedule, or is there any thought that the board will discuss maybe putting it into increments to make, $1,000 is pretty diluted over a 12-month period, or $500 over a 12-month period, if there was any thought of the board discussion, that would be put in larger increments, or additional funds added with that?
Added to the overall salary.
Mr. Downey, you want to respond to that? Because
We are discussing the, one option would be to add to that so that it would be an amount that was noticeable in a monthly check for all our employees, and that's one of the topics of discussion tonight, I believe. But felt like that a monthly increase in the salary schedule, all of that money that's coming from the state is going directly to the employees. And then we're talking about adding additional money to that so that it is noticeable.
Yeah, but you're just going to put it in 12 increments, what you're saying, basically, into the salary.
That has been part of the discussion, yes, ma'am.
All right, and I would hope that we would encourage the business community to do likewise.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
As you scrub your budget, I hope that you would encourage them to do likewise, to look at what the board has done, and that you've made this earnest effort in your budget, that they would do likewise.
The community
Just
business,
an editorial remark, sorry.
the best businesses.
Oh, I didn't know who they were. I'm sorry.
The business community.
Okay, thank you.
any other comments? If not, Mr. Ruggio.
Okay. The last section of our general fund revenues is revenue from federal sources. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Some of these federal grants we're still unclear on, like on line 39. So we've budgeted conservatively there. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have on the federal sources.
Mr. Ruggio, before we leave behind our revenue sources, I failed to ask one question, and this has come up several times over the last few weeks. Are we still awaiting an indication of what our assessed valuation will be for determination of?
Yes, sir. We have not received a letter from the assessor spelling out what the total assessed valuation will be
As I
for the
understand it, the books
2019
are-
year.
I'm sorry, sir.
For the 2019 year.
As I understand it, the books are now open for final review preparatory to closing them in a few weeks so they can do their calculation of ad valorem taxes. So I would think we should be getting a number.
Yes, sir.
Any day.
Hopefully, we'll have a report to give to the board at our August 1st meeting where we can, I know there is some specific advertising requirements that we have to do before the board can actually adopt the millage, so we'll hopefully be able to begin that process at the next board meeting. I wish we could have had the information to do it tonight, but was not available yet.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have any questions or comments regarding revenue? Oh, Ms. Smith, I'm sorry.
Mr. Rougeau, back on the interest on investments and just looking at the 2018-19 budget, we received $375,000. In the market that we have today, that just seems like that's a very low number. And I know that we do not want to be very, aggressive and take a chance, but that's extremely low in the market that we've experienced this year. What, I guess, is it just CDs and just our market accounts that we're in where there's a return? I mean, have we been more aggressive into an area? Or maybe you could explain a little bit of that.
Well, the one thing with our cash flow, we don't have the full fund balance every month. When we get to December, we're probably at our lowest cash flow point because we're waiting on receiving the property taxes, which would come in January, would receive the bulk of those. So January, we're back up to full speed, but all through the year, we're running off the taxes that were collected in January and February. So that full balance is not always there, so we don't have the full amount of the fund balance that's being invested at all times just due to cash flow requirements. So we always try to have plenty of money on hand to be able to pay the bills on a day-to-day basis. Those monies are in our direct deposit accounts, and they do earn based off the 90-day treasuries, which I know is not the best return on investments, but we definitely try to be aggressive as we can in our fiscal agent agreement to get as much money as we can there. If we know that we have a block of money that is not going to be needed, of course, we will do something different with that. We do buy treasuries where we can. We also do certificates of deposit, which a lot of times will have a greater return than some of the treasuries. But the board has a very narrow investment policy just to protect us from bad investments or whatever you want to call it. So we could be more aggressive, but I know with greater return sometimes come greater risk. So we're very conservative. If you want to look at something different, that's something that we definitely can approach and try to do something different with. But we definitely try to maximize all we can with the constraints that we operate under.
Okay.
I know that's not what you want to hear, but I'm telling you the honest truth.
Okay. We'll discuss that more later, I guess. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
You can see our total revenues will increase by 1.38% to $238,803,670. Under the expenditures, one common theme that will be in each section that has salaries, we have incorporated into the proposed budget the numbers that the Finance Committee instructed at our last meetings. The $1,000 and $500 raise from the state is incorporated into these numbers, as well as we were instructed to add another $1,500 and $750 for the support. So those numbers are included in here, along with the required retirement contributions and the retired Medicaid, Medicare contributions. So those are all entered into each section that has salaries. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have in this particular section of the regular programs. I know we've gone line by line on each of these, so if there's any particular questions that you may have, I'd be happy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Russo, we got a 38.5% increase in textbooks, workbooks, yet we have a big digital footprint, and I constantly hear people complaining about printing out pages from textbooks. How did we increase $700,000 on that with everything we've been hearing? Is that something that we purchased? Is this the elementary curriculum that we had to push through? I thought that was paid for by grants. Give me some insight into that, please.
Ms. Flowers is here, I believe, and she can, of course, address that, but I do know that the art core curriculum, we paid for what we could out of last year's budget. Some of that came over into this year's budget. We used as the beef money, leaf money, we used everything, but some of it, $800,000, I believe, was what we were able to scrape up out of the 18-19 budget, and the remainder of it is in this year's budget.
So I thought that. Okay, so beef, leaf, and grant money did not pay for all of that.
Paid for $800,000, $800,000 to $900,000 is what we were able to do.
That was module one. She can
So we're getting additional.
Grant money only pays for 3 of our schools to receive that, which puts us on the hook for the remaining elementary schools to pay for. So that's about $2.7 million to pay for those remaining schools.
Okay, thank you.
So, what were the specifics of the modules? Module 1 versus 2, 3, and 4, and some diagnostic material, or?
So prior for 2019 funds, we were able to purchase unit 1 for non-grant schools, and that was $833,000. And we also were able to purchase School Pace, which is the online component, for $71,500. And the rest is on this for units 2, 3, and 4. Kindergarten is the only grade level getting all 4 units this year. We'll add unit 4 to grades 1 and 2 next year, which is actually the implementation plan that is suggested.
So I'm gonna play stupid. We're doing module 1 now. Next year we'll do module 1 and 2. And then, just explain to me that
Sure.
part.
So there are 4 modules, 4 units in this curriculum. They recommend implementing units 1, 2, and 3 for grades 1 and 2 the first year of implementation, because it is such a shift in teaching and learning. And they recommend you purchasing units 1, 2, 3, and 4 in kindergarten, because there are so many standards that are covered individually in each unit that you cannot forego and lock off one of the units. So we purchased unit 1 with 2019 funds, and those are currently at the school. Units 2, 3, and 4 will be staggered shipments throughout the rest of the school year. So 2019-20, we will implement the K-2 for ELA curriculum in whole.
Okay, thank you.
I
believe this goes back to the $2.2 million surprise we had. Correct? Am I the only one that?
What was that?
I didn't hear what you said.
I
Denise.
said, I think this goes back to that, what was it?
Is that K
$2.2
through
million
two?
surprise we had?
Yeah. But I guess I'm
Still a little bit of a loss, but. Any other comments or questions? Mr. Downey?
Ms. Flowers, if you would, this is not going to be a reoccurring cost after we purchase these modules. What will be the yearly approximation in terms of the cost for this
So the only
curriculum?
cost associated with this, as I said, year 2021 will add unit 4 for grades 1 and 2. And then the only other cost associated with that will be, we will have to renew the school PACE online component, which will run it's per school. So as we add campuses, that increases the cost. And the only other cost associated would be if we add teachers because we increase our population. Because the way the units are purchased, each teacher gets units 1 through 3 or 1 through 4, depending on what grade level they are. So it's a teacher set that has to be purchased. And this also this purchase included a kit for every single SPED teacher as well. So we will not have any teachers who interact with our children going without the ELA curriculum.
And so I think part of the frustration is the fact that Pearson ran out after 7 years and that we did not have a plan in place to gradually shift over. Can you speak to that just for knowledge of the board?
So we shifted, in 2016, we began implementing ELA grades 3 through 12 with the ELA guidebook novels, which are tier 1 in the state. And because of the way that that program is implemented, it's strictly the purchase of novels and unit readers that required funding on our part. And I was able to stretch what I had originally set aside for middle school, high school to purchase an ELA curriculum and was able to stretch that entire budget for grades 3 through 12. The other side of that is I do have to print materials yearly for student use that are the student notes that are associated with that program. I would have had on my proposed budget this year this curriculum, but what surprised everybody was the deadline required by the grant. So I knew this implementation was coming. It just came a little bit sooner than we anticipated because of deadlines associated with the redesign grant, the super app.
How much did that grant actually give us?
We have 6 elementary schools on that grant, and we were able to purchase materials. We had 3 schools on redesign last year that I purchased ARC 4 for, and I have 3 schools this year that are new to the grant that we're purchasing materials for. I didn't bring my grant folder with me, but we did get a significant amount of money, not everything that we requested, of course, but we requested enough upfront that it left us enough room to pay for all of these grant schools in total.
So this additional 800,000, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around it because I totally confused from the 2.2 million we approved back in the spring. Is that for this, or was that something in addition to this?
That was for this.
So we did,
That money was not spent in the spring in total. We're gonna
And when we talked about that, and I thought it was 2.5 million at the time, but maybe it was 2.5 or 2.2. But we did mention that we were going to be able purchasing it with the funds from the beef and the leaf and some other money, and then we would have some more money rolling over into 2019. So it was discussed, at that time.
so this is carryover from the original 2.2.
Yeah, it's not an
2.5.
additional, it's a carryover that we needed to pay for this.
Okay.
I'm not coming back to the well. This is part of the presentation that we presented to you back in the spring.
Okay, I guess just with the new amount being 2.4 and then the additional, I guess I was crossing hairs there trying to, because I thought we did a actual payment back in the spring, but that was just to approve funding and draw it out, and then put in what we needed based off of beef shortage.
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Not. Go ahead, Mr. Rizzo.
Okay. The total regular education expenditures increased by 2.82% to $97,539,603. Special education, no major changes other than the raises that we have talked about there. You may notice that the sabbatical leave does have some changes. Those are always estimated on the number of requests for sabbaticals. So we've decreased some of those based on the request. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have under the special education expenditures. The next section is the vocational education.
Did we add head count on line item 90, salaries? Is that the drastic increase? Because that's not just the raise.
Well, you know, it's about $100,000 increase. We, over last year, these were the positions that were approved by the board for Ms. Spillers to take out of her basic education grant and the 1% MFP monies. It's an actual 1.5 additional person, a full-time and a part-time person. I think one is to work with the Jump Start at the high schools, and but I know Ms. Spillers came and asked the board to be able to do that out of her grant and 1% MFP monies.
Okay, thank you. It's just, and I'll say this, it lists 2019, 2020 employees, and it gives us 18 compared to 19, but it on the monies, but it doesn't give us on the employees. So that's why we have to ask these questions, just because it says 7.5 employees. What's a $100,000 increase? If there was a number there maybe that showed a head count increase, it would make sense, you know, be a lot more easy to understand.
Well, we have the information. It'd be easy to include another column. It'd just make the numbers smaller. So we can definitely do that.
We can get Mr. Newman some glasses.
I can see them, that's fine.
Okay.
But no, it's just, and that's why I have to ask that question, is
Well, we
just,
can definitely put that column in. I mean, it was sitting right next to it in the
or
file,
change the
so.
column to
Yeah.
a plus minus, or a change column. You know, is this change, and is it +1 or -1, +2, -2? And then that way, when it goes to head count, you know if it changed one way or the other, you know. That's just a piece of information that helps read better.
Cheatham.
Were you done, Mr. Newman? Okay. Kind of leading on that, I was going to hold this question or thought for later, but I do like Mr. Newman's idea of that, so we can, you know, adding that column in. I realize it will make it smaller, but we discussed, you know, once we get this budget approved, every time that there's change made, we will still have the proposed budget column. Are we gonna move forward with doing that as well?
Yeah, you bet. We had talked about that at the last meeting, that we'll have the original budget, and then if there's any changes, we'll have a finance committee meeting to go over those quarterly, I believe is what we had talked about doing. So, but it'd be easy to put that column in there. I'll do that and get that sent out to all the board members. That's not an issue.
Well, I think that column, it'll help the board members as well, but I think it would help, you know, people that are in the audience or on YouTube or wherever watching and questioning it.
Yeah.
Because we've had this and we've gone through it as board members and we've looked at it, but, you know, they might just be seeing it for the first time. So I think the proposed budget column and then the number of employees, you know, updated would be beneficial as well.
We can do it. However the committee wants it presented, we'll be happy to. Some of the decreases in the vocational ed is she was shifting her monies around to be able to pay for that 1.5 positions that we've been talking about. Any other questions on vocational education? Okay, the next section is other instructional programs. We did have, I know you can see, I believe it's line 117 had a hefty increase, but the dollar amount was not, that was just our summer remediation. So we had went ahead and budgeted similar to how we came out for the 18-19 year.
Mr. Bull.
Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Downey.
Mr. Russo, Mr. Newman pointed out, line item 120, there's a reduction. What would explain that? Do you know off the top of your head?
David?
Could that be a result of more half stipends than full stipends, which would create a reduction in the amount that we were paying out?
Yeah, I know we worked with HR to be able to come up with those amounts, so that definitely could be part of it as well.
Well, my point was that when a full stipend coach is going to be paid at a higher rate because they're considered a 10-month employee versus 2 half stipends, which they're going to be paid at a different rate and they're considered a 9-month. So that may explain the decrease.
I'll definitely put a check by that one and look at it closer and.
Because there's not a head count next to that one, so that was kind of what spurred that was, we have
Yeah.
a reduction, but there's not a head count, so just kind of curious where that was stemming from.
Yeah, and these are just the supplements that the coaches would get, and they vary depending on what sports they coach
Sure.
and different things. So it's hard to give a hard, fast number on that, but we'll definitely look at that a little closer and give you a better explanation.
And I know we're not shrinking, our programs aren't shrinking, so for a $130,000 reduction in those type of supplements and stipends, it's just makes me curious, did we roll them from a supplement and stipend into a classification of employee and they're getting their money there, or did we
Yeah.
lose head count in that venue?
Not
or
that
what?
I'm aware of. We'll look at that further.
Well, and it's very difficult to have a specific number off of all the coaches that are in middle school and high school. And my example would be this. Airline High School gets 15 coaching stipends, but they may have 27 people filling those 15 two-sport stipends. Halton High School gets 15 coaching stipends, and a stipend is defined as somebody that coaches 2 sports. But they may use 23 people to fill those 15 two-sport stipends. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that number fluctuates and varies at each school and even during the year, because you have changes about who's coaching what and how many sports they're going to coach and that kind of thing. So it's a very, very fluid number. You have approximately 15 for each high school. The single A and triple A schools are going to have 12 and 10, and then you have 6 per middle school. So you're talking about over 100 different stipends that can then turn into 180 people coaching 1 or 2 sports. So that's part of the difficulty with attaching a specific number to that.
And that's a system
Okay. Okay.
Ms. Brotherton?
Mr. Rougeau, does this include cheerleader sponsors, dance line sponsors, when it says extracurricular?
Yes, ma'am.
So it concludes,
Doesn't have to be necessarily coaching, it could be an extracurricular type of sport, activity.
okay.
Any other questions in the other instructional expenditures? Okay, the next section is the special programs. Also, this money in this particular section is funded through grants. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, the next section is the People Support Services section. And you can see some of these decreases that we have, Mr. Downey had met with many of the departments to be able to ask them to do whatever they could to be able to reduce their expenditures. So some of these expenditures that you've seen reductions in throughout the lines that we've gone through thus far have been included in that amount.
Mr. Downey?
Yes, sir.
Just something we've talked about before, but just in case we should have anyone present who's not aware of the hugely expanded need for interpreters in our school. How many are we dealing with now? How many foreign languages are our schools dealing with right now?
At last count, 23.
That's my understanding.
We have several schools that have well over 10 different languages spoken by their student body, and I think the total number within the parish is 23 different languages.
It's quite an issue.
Oh, yes, sir.
It's
It's very difficult to find those interpreters. That's an HR issue, human resource issue in terms of being able to find them. My understanding is the certification process that the state requires of them to be a certificated employee is very, very difficult to pass. And so that continues to be a huge challenge even for those that are interested in providing that service.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions in the People Support Services? The next section is the Instructional Staff Services. I know that there were some shifting from line 190 and 189, so that's for some of the changes there is due to that, as well as the proposed raises. Line 195, you'll see an increase there as well on the instructional coaches. Our auditors we had an issue with the instructional coaches that were being paid out of grant funds, federal funds. Since we were providing that service at other schools, they felt like it was a supplanting issue, so that's the reason that the general fund is having to absorb some of those positions. That was the reason. Any questions, any other questions under the instructional staff services?
Ms. Smith?
So, Mr. Rougeau, that extra 800,000 was covered in where? Where did that come from? What were they under before?
That'll come straight in the general fund, is not going to absorb that. That is coming from the, mainly from the Title I program that was providing those services at Title I schools for an instructional coach. Since we were providing them at the other schools, it was an issue because we have to do the same for all schools. So the general fund was paying for those. So, you know, it was a supplanting issue that the general fund was paying for other schools but not paying for the title schools. So that's why that was a finding.
So what did we shift?
I wasn't happy about it either.
What did we shift to make up for that 800,000 that was for title schools that we weren't doing? What did we shift to there?
I understand.
What did we shift?
You know, and the grant, I guess I didn't understand your question. I'm sorry.
So we had to absorb the 800,000 in the general fund. So what did we shift to Title I of $800,000 from general fund to the Title I budget to help absorb some of that?
Yes, ma'am, that they will be able to provide additional services in that particular budget. I know that we've talked about being able to help some of the lower performing schools, so that's definitely some areas that they can have additional funds in that particular federal grant to be able to do some of those things. This isn't anything that we initiated or that we wanted to do. It's all driven by the way the grants are governed.
And if I could add to that, part of that requirement for those Title I funds is that it is in addition to what is already being done at the other schools. So when the instructional coaches began, if my history serves me correctly, they were at first at the title schools. Well, that was in addition to what was taking place at the non-title schools. When they were added to the non-title schools, then it wasn't considered a supplement at the title schools anymore, and it turned into supplanting what was already, it wasn't above and beyond what was at the non-title schools. So then it became an issue where we could not support it through Title I funds. We had to shift it to the general fund.
So some of those available funds now are where we're going to utilize the positions that you're going to present to us
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
next meeting?
Yes,
That will be
ma'am.
utilized in primarily the Title I
Only
schools?
the Title I schools.
Okay.
We need to move along. We're going to run out
Okay.
of time here, and I think you're going to want some action on this. So, and everyone received our copy yesterday. So, unless there are any objections, Mr. Rougeau can step it up a gear so we can try to get this completed within the time remaining. Go ahead, Mr. Rougeau.
Okay, the general administration is the next section. Not a lot of large dollar changes here. There was one item on line 251, should have been 2 employees instead of 1. We do have a secretary for each of the assistant superintendents, so that should be 2 instead of 1 there. The salaries are correct, but that particular number was off as we were reviewing this and didn't get it changed before we sent it. Any questions under the general administration? Okay, the next section is the school administration, which includes all the principals, assistant principals, and clerical staff at each of the schools. Be happy to answer any questions that you may have there.
Who were the original, what was just added today?
Okay, the next section is the business services. We did make some cuts in this section as well, just some of they're not large dollar amounts, but everybody was trying to help with cuts to their individual budgets.
Ms. Brotherton?
So, Mr. Russo, every department head has been visited, and it reflects in this budget some things they're trying to help with their cuts. Is that,
I know we have asked the departments to do what they could to try to help us. I know that Mr. Downey did meet with some of the departments that had larger budgets to be able to go through that with them. So I know we've definitely tried to do what the board instructed at our last finance meeting.
thank you.
Okay, the next section is operation and maintenance of plant. You can see some large dollar
Mr. Bullock?
decreases.
Sorry, pardon me, Mr. Bachhaus?
On the warehouse manager, is that a pay raise?
I'm sorry, could you speak up, Mr. Bachhaus?
Is on the warehouse manager,
Yes, sir.
104% increase for one person, is that a pay raise?
Yeah, Jimmy Boyd was our warehouse manager. He passed away last year. We have not actually replaced that position, so that's something that we're looking at. That definitely may be an area that we can look at. It's line 314.
Thank you.
But the proposed budget does have a full salary there. The reason only half is because Mr. Boyd had passed during the year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think percentage-wise,
Thank
it's
you.
big, but I think dollar-wise, it's reasonable. I think the percentage caught his eye. But I think that is from not having anybody in that position.
Exactly.
Last, okay.
Exactly. The next section is operation and maintenance of plant. Mr. Roger took a pretty good cut on line 345, $750,000, so that's going to really make his budget tight.
And just for, if I could.
Yes, sir, Mr. Downey, go ahead.
We've made some pretty extreme cuts in some of these departments, and so that is going to create a need to defer some attention, and we all need to be aware of that up front. We've done what we've been asked to do, and which is try to create an opportunity for us to benefit all our employees, but with that comes a price, which is we're not going to be able to address everything maybe like we have done in the past, and we will have to defer some of it until we can get information back about property tax, sales tax, those kinds of things, and know that we're on safe ground. So I just want the board, if you get those calls, it may be related to having to take those steps.
And there is no provision in this budget for repair of the building we're in right now.
I know that Mr. Roger had looked at doing some measures to make it last as long as Band-Aid it.
We're
Yes, sir.
Band-Aiding. I'm
Yes, sir.
talking
Yes, sir.
the estimated amount that we received a couple of years ago, which that hopefully will not wake up
Yes, sir.
and catch us. Yes, sir, Mr. Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple clarification questions. It's minimal dollar amounts, but upkeep of soccer fields for $14,000, is that Tinsley?
Yes, sir. We entered in an agreement with the city several years ago, and that's our portion of it. It's about, our portion is like 25%. They send us a bill where they've the company that they use to come in and sand the fields or whatever they do to reseed, overseed, and different things like that.
Do
So
we in turn send them a bill for any of the wax that we put on our gym floors that they use?
that's a good question. No, sir, we do not send them a bill for our wear and tear on our gym floors. I know they do let us use the Civic Center at no rental fees, several times during the year, so we try to.
So we don't pay any fees whatsoever anytime we use the Civic Center?
Unless they have food or something like that they use, so we're not paying any fees for the actual rental.
Cleanup, okay, but
Right.
no cleanup fees? I mean,
No, sir.
I just,
I
the
understand.
agreement,
I know where you're
I didn't
coming
agree
from.
with the agreement when it was done back then. I thought it was silly for us to still be paying for soccer fields. It's only $14,000, but to me, it's the principle of the matter that we're paying them, but, they use our facilities free of charge for all their rec leagues because we're here for the betterment of the community and the students. But at the same time, we get a bill for putting sand on a soccer field.
I understand.
And, so the 32.5 for upkeep of athletic fields, is that mark and paint and different things like that for all our stadiums?
Yes, sir. We have a rotation at the high schools. Will receive, I think it's $5,000 a year to, yes, sir.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
Each high school gets $5,000 per year for upkeep of their fields. That includes football, soccer, baseball, softball. Every sixth year, one of those high schools, if it's their turn, gets $7,500 instead of the $5,000. It is for upkeep, additional chemicals, paint,
Okay.
just general upkeep, mowers. Those coaches purchase those mowers from their athletic funds, and typically the coach is the one that maintains the field, whatever field it may be.
Mr. Downey, do you have an idea on what each one of those schools spends on top of this 5,000?
It would depend on whether they do overseeding in the wintertime with ryegrass, or if they're top dressing the field. I mean, it could get fairly expensive. And this is just an effort to supplement or defray some of the costs that they incur. And those costs come from, those bills come from their budget. So we're just trying to ease the pain a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Downey.
What was the $27,000 we had last year for upkeep of grounds that we do not have this year, which is line item 348?
I may have to get Mr. Roger to help me with that. It could have very, very well been that we, I know that we maintain the playgrounds with the mulch and different things like that.
Might have to do, and I don't know, Mr. Roger, you might be able to speak to this, but it may have to do with moving the additional playground equipment that was moved and purchased at Plain Dealing Elementary.
Yeah, that's
Would
probably
that
what
be
it
part of
is.
this?
Yeah.
Mr. Newman, in 2020, we're going to try real hard to get item 346 to be a 0. Look at some turf fields in Bossier Parish again.
Any other questions in the
Mr. Chairman.
maintenance
Any
and
other questions
operation?
or comments?
Let's vote.
Go ahead, please, sir.
All
Like
righty.
to make a motion?
Let's vote.
You can see in some of the utilities, we've bumped up those amounts for the new school, so we have included there as well. Any questions on the maintenance and operation of plant? Okay, the next section is student transportation services. You can see overall the budget did go down by almost 2%, and that was due to some of the conservative estimates that Mr. Haddon was able to to help us with there. He did have some good news on the buses that we, or the grant that we'd applied for to get the buses. You want to tell them about that?
It won't help us for this year, but the state is handing out $6 million in grant money for alternative fuel buses. The 69 districts in the state that apply for this, both parishes are going to get about 22% of the money, which is $1,284,000. So we already got our buses for this summer. For next summer, the state's going to pay for up to 50% of buses for up to 25 buses. Good news.
Be a natural gas,
Propane.
propane.
He does such a good job.
Good job.
He does such a good job.
Any other questions under the student transportation budget?
I just have a comment, Ms. Rohr. He's already changed that from bus drivers to operators on here, so we got that taken care of for you.
The next section is essential services. Be happy to answer any questions that you might have there. Okay, the next section is community service. This is our 4-H and the DARE program, no changes there. The next section is the facility acquisition section. No, do see some changes here to reflect the actual expenditures, so. The next section is the debt service section. We do still have some qualified school construction bonds that are outstanding, and this budget is to budget for the principal and interest payments. We have a sinking fund that goes into every year, and at the end of the 10 years, there's enough money in there to be able to pay off those loans. So we're several years into that. That'll be rolling off here. I think we have 3 years left. But overall, our total expenditures are $234,578,916, which represents about a 1.3% increase over the revised 18-19 budget. We do have a few items that are excess or deficiencies of revenues over in expenditures that are added in. Our indirect costs from our federal programs is in this section as well. And you can see a transfer out for food service that the board continues to have to supplement that. And it's not just Bossier Parish, it's every parish in the state. With this budget overall, we would have a projected fund balance of $33.9 million, which we do have a balanced budget and have done what the committee asked us to do at the last meeting to incorporate the numbers that you gave us. And so I feel good about the proposed budget and what we're able to do. I know it did have to take some cuts to some areas, but I think overall, I think it's a move in a good direction.
Mr. Rougeau, would this be an appropriate time before we move into the supplemental budgets that are provided? Would this be an appropriate time to request permission to go ahead and advertise
So move.
for the budget?
Very good.
Okay. Have a motion by Mr. Cheatham.
Second.
Second by Ms. Brotherton. All in favor of authorizing publishment or advertisement? It's unanimous. Thank you, sir. Go ahead with your
Okay.
supplemental.
And the special revenue funds and the federal funds, you can see page 12 is the sales tax fund. The estimated numbers are based off the same collections that we received for June of last year. We won't know that number for the month of June until July 31st. So it should be similar to last year, maybe up a little bit. So this number, we hope, will move in a little bit of a positive direction. It won't be a big shift, but I know for the month of May, we were up about $120,000 over the previous time period for May of 18. So I think probably eight of the months have been increases, while 4 of the months have been small decreases for the sales tax. The next budget is the half-cent sales tax that just...
Pardon me, Mr. Downing?
I wanted to address this before we got into these additional categories, but Mr. Rougeau talked about us making an effort to address areas and be able to provide an opportunity to do what the board has chosen to do. And Colonel Haddon, Ms. Flowers, Stacy Roget, Mr. Roget, Dr. Bourgeois, all work together to try to accomplish the task that was given to us, and they should be commended for their attitude about what we were trying to accomplish for our employees. So I just wanted to publicly thank them for their involvement and attitude about that task. It's not easy, and appreciate what they did and working together to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish.
Any other comments?
Any questions about the sales tax fund? Page 13 is the 0.5% sales tax fund. It's actually included as part of, on page 12, the overall sales tax fund, but we do break that out just to show what that 0.5% sales tax does collect. Page 14 is the Unified Taxing District. This is the bond sinking fund that we take those property tax revenues and pay the principal and interest on the outstanding bonds. Page 15 is the Salary and Insurance Property Tax Fund. Page 16 is the Bond Election Construction Fund. We on this particular fund is we do not show any sale of any new bonds. We do expect to collect interest. It may be that once we get that property tax information, we'll be able to sell some bonds, but we didn't know it, so we didn't put it in there at this point. We do have a balance in there that to be spent on the projects that the board has approved.
Mr. Rougeau, I'd like to make one request with permission of Mr. Newman, because I think it probably come before Building and Grounds, but it's been quite some time since we had an up-to-date presentation of what we've paid to our consulting engineer, architect, and I think it would be appropriate.
Mr. Norwood, you catching this?
Do you agree, Mr. Newman? It's time for us to get a complete, accurate, up-to-date of what we've paid to Yates, because it's significant. Or it was
I'll make sure I
last
get with Mr. Norwood and we have something available at our next B&G meeting for you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Rougeau.
Yes, sir. Page 17 is the beef fund. We have projected about the same amount of revenues coming in. Of course, you see the interest has increased there. We are very limited on our investments in this fund. They can only be government-backed securities. So if we have a CD, it can't be more than the FDIC insured amount at a particular bank, and it definitely has to have the full backing of the U.S. government. So we're limited on what we're able to invest there, and that's by the statute that's associated with the beef account. But we do expect to have a little over $1 million to be able to spend in this fund. You can see our balance continues to grow, and we project at the end of the year to have $56.6 million. Line 18 is the LEAF, which is from the tobacco monies that the state received. And we do expect to receive about $300,000 this coming year.
Does that go down every year?
Could you say again, please?
Does that go down every year? Because it's,
Not necessarily, but we usually get about that same amount every year. You can see that this year we've received $416,000. It may be that much next year, but we just never quite know exactly the amount that we will receive.
okay.
Line 19 is the group hospitalization and dental fund. With our projections, we expect to still have $4 million at the end of the year. So although our expenditures are a little more than our estimated revenues, we still will have a good positive balance.
And it should be pointed out, as of right now, there's no proposed modification of premiums. We'll
That's
maintain
correct.
them for another year.
No premium increases at this time.
Thank you.
That's good news.
Page 20 is the child nutrition budget. Just due to time, I'm going to keep moving unless someone has a specific question. Page 21 is the Title I budget. Page 22 is the Title II budget. That's mainly used for professional development.
Mr. Russo, the beginning of the year, then the speaker that was coming in for the first day of school, what fund did that come out of? I heard it was a grant.
The new teachers,
No, the one that for all employees,
I believe that's Title II.
Title II?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
I've been asked that.
The teacher in-service stuff all comes out of Title II. It is not general fund. That is all.
Well, I need that, but I didn't
Title
know
II
which grant.
yeah.
Okay, so out of Title II funds. So
Yes.
that is not coming out of general.
Correct.
Okay. I've been asked that a lot in the last few days.
the major staff development or professional development is out of the Title II.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you.
Page 23 is the Title III, the limited English proficiency. And we definitely could use more funds there. You can see that continues to be just such a small amount. Title IV. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Cheatham?
I have a question. It's not about, I don't think, the Title IV, but the teacher pay that we've incorporated into this budget, is that something that we need to vote on to change the salary by the $2,500 and the $1,250? Is that something we need to vote on, or since that's already in the budget, is that something we don't have to do?
Well, we had that discussion earlier. I know that payroll was trying to move forward. The 12-month employees, their contract year, of course, started July the 1st. But everyone else, it would, if the board passes this, it would be in their August check. So if the
So
board
if we
passed it.
pass I know we're advertising the budget now.
Right.
Then after it's advertised, we're coming back to approve it.
The 15th of August would be when the board would adopt the budget after we've had the period to be able to advertise it to meet the requirements of the law. So we would have to be working on it during that time in order to be ready for the August payroll. But if the board chose to direct staff to go ahead and put that in, make that effective, we can go ahead and we're going to have to be working on it anyway for it to happen. But if it's a consensus of the board to direct staff to do that and you vote on that, then we'll move forward with it.
And I know we're running out of time here, but I do want to just visit this. So, and board members correct me if I speak wrongly here, but so the $2,500 and the $1,250 salary that we're adding to our employees, that includes the $1,000 and the $500 from the state. Then that's has been a stipend for the last couple years. We're taking that $1,200 and that $700 stipend and we're making it built into their salary structure and making it permanent. So it's not like they have to guess every year, am I going to get this, am I going to get this? We're actually taking that. And then where we had y'all go cut the budget in this past week by about 2.2 million, I think was the number you'd given us, that's where we've come up with the additional $300 for teachers and then the $50 for support personnel. Is everybody on board with me on that? So, I know all of us watch social media and I know there were some concerns and questions about it is a $2,500 and a $1,250 raise that's being put into the salary schedule. But when you start breaking it down and moving it around, yes, they did get that stipend last year, so it's not money that's on top of that, but it is something that is now guaranteed, and you no longer have to wonder if you're going to get that stipend every year. So I just wanted to kind of break that down. I would like to see the Finance Committee vote on it tonight and have it effective for that first check. Welcome to any comments or anything, but I think it's something we need to go ahead and get moving with. Again, and to the media or whoever else might be here, we've scrubbed this budget for weeks. We've gone line by line, and we just cut 2.2 million, which was probably the most that we could find to cut to be able to give a $300 raise. So it's not like we were sitting here with tons of excess money to try to give a raise. I believe we are still in need of help from our community, whether that be a sales tax, property tax, gas tax, tobacco tax, whatever that tax might be at some point. I do believe we're going to need some help there. And to our employees, and again, I've read social media probably 30 minutes before I came here, and again, our employees are not happy. They're looking at it like, well, we lost the attendance stipend. That was, a pilot program. It's not something that was going to stay around. Some people earned it, some people didn't. It wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't fair to every employee. But the fact that we can now, with the state's help and with the stipend, making it permanent, and then the 2.2 million that we were able to trim for the 300 and the 500, at least we're able to do something along with the be-back check. But I would like to see the committee vote on that, and we could vote on it in the board meeting tonight. Any questions or comments on that?
Mr. Cheatham, I realize we're underpaid compared to the other, but what is our percentage of our teachers now? Are all the positions filled? Classroom teachers,
How many are we starting school short?
instructional?
No, as of today, we have approximately 46 positions open. We still have principals that are still interviewing and trying to fill those positions. That number could change in the next week or two. We may have some that wait till the last minute to resign or retire. But right now, that number is close to what it typically is. So we're working to resolve it.
Ms. Brotherton?
I agree with Mr. Cheatham. I think we need to get it voted on and get that out of the way so the teachers will know what they're going to make. But also, are we going to get a new salary schedule printed out so they'll be able to go to it and look at what their salary should be for their years?
Yes, ma'am, we definitely will do that.
Okay. So when would, I mean, I hate to put you on the spot, but when do you think they would be able to get a new salary schedule?
Got to be approved.
We've
I
been
know,
working
but if
on
it's
it in
approved.
anticipation of the board moving forward with this, so it would be quickly that we could get that to you, and we can email it to you or however you'd like to receive it.
Yeah, I just think they need to be able to see that as soon as possible.
Well, Mr. Self, seeing as how this is in committee, and I think this is just committee direction to staff to get it ready for board approval of the budget on the 15th of August. Is there anything that we really need to do to make that check effective on the 25th of August? Or, Mr. Rougeau, what do you need done, and what kind of direction do you need?
We need some kind of approval from the finance committee to the board, telling us to go ahead and incorporate these amounts into the salary schedules.
The question is, Mr. Self, at this point, since we're an hour and 29 minutes into our agenda, is it acceptable for us to amend the agenda of the Finance Committee meeting for this date to add this one item?
Yes, you can do it like a normal board meeting, unanimous.
Fine. Thank you. In the interest of time, the chair will entertain a motion to amend the agenda to add the item of addressing a request to pay an additional amount, or to incorporate an additional amount into our salary schedule, namely for certified professional employees, $2,500 per year, and for support personnel,
$1,250.
$1,250.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion by
Ms.
Ms.
Brotherton.
Brotherton, second by Mr. Newman, to make this amendment. All in favor? It is unanimous. Chair will now entertain a motion
So moved.
to,
Second.
we have a motion and a, I'm sorry, Mr. Self. Yes, sir. Any public comment? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the full board
So moved.
Second.
this additional funding or change in funding.
Trying to help you out, Ms. Rule. So moved.
Motion by Mr. Cheatham, second by Ms. Darby. Ms. Brotherton, you have a comment?
No, I'm voting.
Okay, all in favor? It is unanimous. Mr. Rougeau, we're out of time. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for all of your help and assistance. I've heard nothing but positive comments from every board member. We spent a lot of hours in here, but I think everyone
It
would
was
agree
worth it.
we've learned a lot. We thank you for getting this budget, proposed budget, ready for us now.
Thank you.
And if anybody can see anywhere there's any excess funding or inappropriate funding, I wish they'd show it to me. I don't see it.
And I echo those sentiments, Mr. Chairman. As Vice Chair, I commend Mr. Rougeau, his staff, Mr. Downey, my fellow board members. You know, we've gone through this thing line item by line item. We've asked for public comment. You know, we're going to be, you know, doing a lot of legwork, you know, in the coming months. And we ask for input, we ask for help, we ask for assistance from our community members. And this is not going away. We're going to keep it on the front burner. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment? Hearing none, we stand adjourned.